But if evolution is real, and if there is this constant, I don't know, but it's visible.
I apologize.
Like you can measure it in certain animals.
You can measure adaptation.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence that in fact, I think we've kind of given up on the idea of evolution. The theory of evolution as articulated by Darwin is like kind of not true. Right?
In what sense?
Well, in the most basic sense, the idea that, all life emerged from a single cell organism and over time, and there would be a fossil record of that, and there's not. And
there's not a fossil record of transitionary species, like species that are adapting to its environment.
There's tons of record of adaptation, and you see it in your own life. I mean, I have a lot of dogs. I see adaptation in dogs, through the litter to litter. But no, there's no evidence at all that zero, people evolve seamlessly from a single cell amoeba. No, there's not. There's no chain in the fossil record of that at all. And that's why you don't actually hear people.
Yeah. It's super painful, right? And
it's so painful.
The thing is, like, it's totally this tired creationist argument.
He does go on to give the next 45 seconds that I had to be like, look, we're done with this, is him saying that his own theory is that he is a creationist and that God created humans. And that's which...
It's clearly not his theory in the first place.
Yeah.
But it's also not his theory, right? It's just a cop-out. It's bizarre, the degree of confidence with which he spouts this ignorant bullshit is really impressive, I have to say.
It is.
Even you could see, even Joe Rogan, it has this sort of confused look on his face, like, what do you... Really?
No, how can you be saying that? I saw a great diagram, which was the zealot's corner on the same post, which was like 100% conviction, 0% knowledge.
Exactly.
And it's like, and that podcast has like 8 million views in 24 hours.
I think what would be really interesting would be to ask, what evidence could possibly convince him, right? Mm-hmm. And if you started a conversation like that with him, I think you would rapidly find that he would say no evidence would convince him. Because, for example, there is, of course, a fossil record. There is even a fossil record of things like particular kinds of bacteria and so on. So, but also the whole fossil thing is like, this is a 100 years ago argument. I mean, we have DNA, like the DNA record.
The fact that molecular genetics didn't come up, I was like,
it's bizarre because if you want to know if you're related to somebody, right? So you do a paternity test or something like that, or you go on 23andMe and you find some relatives and cousins and so on. Well, that's evidence that you came from a common ancestor, right? So if you find a third cousin on 23andMe, then you had a common ancestor, and the genetics very clearly shows that, and no one would argue with it, right?
Yeah.
Well, you can do the same thing over millennia, and you can do it over species. So if you do it with humans and chimps and elephants, you'll find that humans and chimps are more closely related to each other than they are to elephants. And you can keep going, and you get a perfectly consistent picture that's entirely consistent with the fossil record, which shows that all of life operates on the same biochemical principles and has shared genes and a history of shared ancestry. That can't expect Joe Rogan to push back with that kind of evidence, but it's just that's why I call it, said it's such a tired argument. He could have been saying that in the 1950s.
Yeah.
And people were with just as much confidence and with just as little evidence, no evidence. So it's kind of funny that we're still having this argument. And of course, in the US in particular, the evolution one is religiously motivated.
Gotcha. Yeah. Is that why you think that in the US specifically, around the Bible Belt area of the US, they're gonna, they're just using their confirmation bias to ignore all the evidence for evolution, which is so obviously there, especially with molecular genetics and DNA, to say that the creationist perspective.
Yeah, it really, really requires some mental discipline to reject all of the evidence that's involved. Because you have to reject geology and you have to reject the physics of things like carbon dating and but I mean, it's not just in the US, of course. There's lots of places that are quite creationist, Northern Ireland being one of them, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but it's just it's a weird thing, and the particular clip that you showed though illustrates a trend these days where people are very willing to make claims that are just willfully ignorant
Yeah.
with enormous confidence. Right?
Enormous
This
confidence.
idea
Yeah.
like we're tired of experts. We don't
He
need.
said we. The thing that annoyed me about that clip is like, we've stopped believing in Darwin's theory of evolution. I'm like, who's we? Don't involve me in this. I hope not. I'm not, or, we're not involved in this we. He's saying we like he has this unanimous group of people behind him and they're all making this argument together. It's like, I don't know who we is in this circumstance, but we.
Yeah, and it's interesting, to think of the audience for that. How many people who don't have, and we've got a biological education, right? So we can judge that. But how many people listening to that who
Exactly.
don't have that education, who may not have had strong opinions about it, but
Exactly.
they'll hear him saying that we have moved on from Darwin or whatever, as if he's talking about the scientific consensus, right?
Yes, exactly.
So it's a rhetorical move that unfortunately can be really effective.
Yes, exactly. That's why I think, I'm a big free speech proponent. I am, I believe that Tucker Carlson has the right to go on a podcast and say that. But
Sure.
that's why I think it's our duty and responsibility to react to it and say that this man doesn't know a shred about evolution or science or genetics or a thing, and this video will certainly not get 7.5 million views.
Yeah.
But, if there are a couple of hundred people see this and think Tucker Carlson doesn't know shit about this topic, then that's at least our duty here.
Yeah, and you know what I think? I completely agree, and I think many scientists when they're thinking about public outreach and science communication and so on, will think, okay, I have a thing to say and I'm going to say it, and they say it, and then they think, right, I did it.
Yeah.
But what they don't realize is that there's people on the other side just don't stop. Right?
Yeah.
They're just going to keep saying he's going to say the same thing tomorrow. He's going to
Yeah.
say the same thing next week, and he just go on and on and on and on. So I agree with you. It does require some persistent engagement on the to
Yes.
get messages on the other side that just constantly debunk those kinds of claims, and
Yeah.
that at the same time provide a positive counter narrative that people can understand, right?
Yeah.
And they say, because that's the challenge, right? Is to you've got on the one hand complex, nuanced, subtle messages of provisional understanding, where people are still arguing about little details, and on the other hand, you've got one sure single truth, nice and simple. We were created by God. So in terms of what. It's not too surprising that some people will lean towards the simple wrong answer, just because it's psychologically less taxing.
If you enjoyed that short podcast clip, then be sure to click on the full podcast that you can watch here.